So, good day everyone. Today, we will be presenting effective learning environments relation to different learning theories. So, one of the primary elements in the teaching learning process is the learning environment. It is an uncontested fact that an effective learning environment is conducive to a student's learning. Just as there are different learning theories, there are different ways in which educators shape the learning environment to reinforce it. We will be going through six of them. I am teacher Danny, and I will be presenting first. The first theory is behaviorism, a theory of learning in which the primary idea is that all behaviors can be acquired through conditioning, which occurs through interaction with the environment. It is also mainly a teacher centered education, in which teachers are the main focal point of a classroom and students are passive learners. So, in simple terms, it's a traditional setting. The knowledge passed on by teachers to their students are viewed as factual and objective. A common example of behaviorism is positive reinforcement. For example, a student gets a perfect score on their test, so the teacher rewards him or her. In the future, students will work hard and study for their test in order to get the reward as well. Students are a passive participant in behavioral learning. Teachers provide the knowledge as part of the stimulus response cycle, and this needs to be done in a repetitive way to regularly remind students what behavior a teacher is looking for. As you can see from the picture behind me, the classrooms are laid out in linear rows along a corridor, with the room for new learners on one end and progresses to the upper grade learners on the other end. Inside the classrooms, the students are also arranged in a similar way, in straight rows, while the teacher is positioned in the front. This kind of arrangement mitigates social interaction between groups of learners and ensures that the students are only exposed to the required stimuli for their learning. The next theory is Cognitivism, a theory by John P.J., which focuses on the processes involved in learning rather than on the observed behavior of the learners. Learners are active participants in this setting. Class facilitators encourage students to take a hands on approach to learning. Examples of a cognitivist approach is giving corrective feedback, focusing on mental activities such as mind mapping and problem solving, etc. A cognitivist school or classroom stimulates the learner's desire and curiosity for exploration. This is why most are usually single or two-story buildings with unframed rooms. This allows the learners to have more interaction with the environment outside their classrooms. This also encourages more social interaction between the learners because learning is much more meaningful if the students experiment on their own rather than passively listening to instructions. So, as to summarize these two theories, all you have to understand is that both are on the opposite side of the spectrum. Behaviorism is teacher centered, while cognitivism is student centered. It shows in the way the classrooms are designed. In the former, students are limited to interact with only their immediate environment, while the latter encourages exploration and inquisitiveness. So that's it, and I will be giving the floor to teacher Noelle for the next part.
Thank you, Teacher Danny. Hello, everyone. I'm Teacher Noelle, and I will discuss constructivism and experiential learning spaces. So, let's start with constructivism. This learning theory was also proposed by Dr. Jean Piaget. So, most of the elements that you will see and will be discussed are similar to cognitivism. According to the constructivist learning theory, knowledge is built and considers the learner's social, cultural, and contextual conditions. Therefore, students must continually be exposed to their environment and the people in it. This way, new information is encountered, processed, and integrated into existing knowledge. As you can see, instead of long and linear corridors like in behaviorism, learning spaces are modified to encourage social interaction. Some schools have a dedicated social space. Meanwhile, classrooms may look like this in the picture. Students sit in pods for collaboration but also have spaces for individual work to develop both interpersonal and interpersonal intelligence. Most classrooms even have didactic materials such as anatomy models or building blocks to build knowledge and understanding of the world through manipulation and experience. Next, let us move on to experiential learning. So, experiential learning is by David Kolb. He published the learning theory in 1984, describing it as a holistic perspective of learning that combines experiences, perceptions, cognitions, and behavior. We learn by doing. Thus, this theory is grounded on experience. Consider the example of cooking food. We perhaps follow a recipe or follow a theory that we made in our head. If the food doesn't turn out as we've imagined or expected, we reflect on the factors that may have led to the error. Maybe the fire was too hot or the measurements of the ingredients were wrong. Once we've done this reflection, we act appropriately, having gained new knowledge from the experience. This learning theory emphasizes the process rather than the outcome. Facilities in an experiential learning classroom, such as canteen or the corridors, are modified to encourage social learning and stimulate the social brain. Room functions should be flexible to accommodate in and outdoor learning. So perhaps the learning area where students are seated can also be transformed into a space for circle time where students sit in a circle with the teacher sitting with them for less formal interactions. So, when observing the fundamental principles of the classroom, you'll see that they are similar, and even the photos you saw of the examples of the classroom are similar. That's because both theories emphasize social interaction and have cyclical processes when it comes to learning. In these theories, learning is an active process that is student centered. In fact, most of the photos shown there are examples of Montessori classrooms that promote these principles. The difference between the two is that in experiential learning, the method of learning is emphasized. Learners have their own ways in grasping and processing information, and thus the classroom reflects this by giving it flexible functions to encourage choice. So that is it for me. Let us now move on to teacher Adrian, who will be discussing the final two learning theories. Thank you.
Moving on, we have the humanistic learning theory. So, this theory prioritizes human needs and interest, and it emphasizes the need to study people holistically. So, we should not just focus on one part of our lives, but in totality, or as I said earlier, holistically. Does this sound familiar to you? Do you remember Maslow's hierarchy of needs? Well, we'll get to that. So Maslow's hierarchy of needs is basically a pyramid, and it shows you the needs that must be met before you can actually self actualize. So, how does this translate into the classroom? Well, it basically says that there are factors that must be met in order for a student to effectively learn. Now, we'll explore one by one these factors according to Maslow's hierarchy of needs. Let's start with the lowest tier, that's physiological needs. So your student must have fresh and clean air. They must be well ventilated. And the room or the environment should be free from noise pollution or free from unwanted odors that can cause distraction. Moving on to the next tier, we have safety needs. Your students must feel secure. If there are bullies, they must resolve that conflict with those bullies. You must be there for them. They must feel secure, emotionally secure in the classroom, or else they'll be distracted from actually taking in what they need. As for the third tier, we have belongingness and love needs. So students should feel that they belong. They should have independence. They should be able to personalize their own space, but still be able to work in groups and create and foster interpersonal relationships. Moving on, the second to the last tier, we have esteem needs. The environment should foster equality. So you as a teacher should make sure that you advocate for equality, or else how would your student have self-esteem? Last but not least is self-actualization itself. If you meet all the criteria leading up to this that I've mentioned earlier, then this will be the last step. You should allow for numerous spaces and give the students the freedom to choose which space they want so that they might unlock their potential. And the last theory, Social situational learning theory. I think this will be the easiest one for you to get. So, people learn from other people. They learn through observing people in social situations. That's obvious, basically. But according to Bandura in 1977, people learn by copying the behaviors of others. It is referred to as modeling. So, what does this have to do with being in a classroom? So, as the social learning theory emphasizes observation as the means by which we learn, interaction with other people can never be brought out of the equation. Thus, it is social. But interaction with whom? Bandura stated that it's an interaction with models. So it's basically those who know better than you, those who are better than you. So what should schools do? A school should opt for an environment that encourages interaction and learning from models. So schools should have models. Schools should have those people that you can look up to. And that must be a key point in that environment. So how would the environment look like? Well, as I've said earlier, it should be one that focuses on interaction with others. And that's basically every other theory mentioned earlier. Well, except for the behaviors theory. So the designs and rules suggested in the other theories can also be applied to this theory. Thank you very much for listening.